Delayed intro is delayed. Guys, welcome back to the review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 341. Yeah, we got a bit to talk about with this episode. Honestly, a lot happened in this episode, and it was really interesting to watch. And there are a few things that I do kind of look at with this episode and kind of go, eh. But overall, I still think that this episode is really good. So, we start out with Ison walking through the halls alone. He's made his decision. And honestly, it is pretty surprising to me. But like I said, I'm not going to hold it against Ison for the decision that he made. I said regardless of what decision he made, I wouldn't hold it against him. But he thinks back on what Blake was saying about abandoning someone who risked their lives for his. And Ison just flat out says it's because he doesn't want to die. And again, that's totally understandable. That's totally okay. Like, Ison, you've done a lot of good and you've risked your life a lot of times for your friends. I think you've earned at least a few more times to say, guys, I don't want to die today. But yeah. So Ison is on his own, and he thinks back to the situation with the bureau agents, Fury, and everything kind of going on right now. And he does wonder. He does still think, should I go back for them? Like, should I go back? And as he wanders off, though, he runs into Arlo, who doesn't recognize Ison and asks for an update. And after he gets one, Ison kind of puts on a fake voice, and like Arlo clearly doesn't catch on that it's him. So he's just like, okay, cool, thanks. Arlo immediately goes to attack Ison. He goes to like knock him out. He like sends like that barrier wave again, and Ison immediately catches on, and he's kind of like Arlo, it's me. And Arlo, quick timing on Arlo's part, he stops the attack right before it gets to Ison. And honestly, I think that's pretty impressive of Arlo. The fact that he was able to stop on a dime like that. That's impressive, Arlo. Like, respect to you. Respect for you for that ability control. That mastery, goated. Anyway, he asks Ison why he's by himself, and Ison explains the situation about the trio and with John fighting against the Bureau. When Arlo asks where they are, Ison then begins to lead him back to where they are. We cut to John, who's taking out multiple officers, and he scans their abilities, mentioning that there's nothing very good for him to take. That is relevant for later in the episode. But as more officers show up, we get to see John getting back to fighting. As he kind of like takes them out, some Bureau officers. Also, there is a reason why many Bureau officers have almost identical abilities aside from color. But he gets kind of restricted with like from both wrists and one of his legs. He gets restricted with kind of like a lasso type abilities, and he then electrocutes everyone through the lasso. And his ability seems to be like much stronger now. Like he I can only assume he like channels some form of electricity around himself, which we see like the regular black lightning kind of like envelop around the lasso and everything. But when it electrocutes everyone around him, they're kind of like in like this like golden, I want to say kind of like a Dragon Ball Z type aura, but it doesn't look like that at all. It looks kind of like some form of like crystal or something that they're entrapped in, but they're clearly getting electrocuted. So this is completely different from something that we've seen before from John. This is a completely different art style. So I don't think this has to do with a different artist working on it at this point. I think this is just flat out just like John is stronger in some capacity. But yeah, based on how drastically it's drawn, I think John's definitely got some form of an upgrade on him. But John takes care of work again. But we do see that John is starting to get tired, and he does start to breathe more heavily. Now, We then cut to Farah. Farah, who is reflecting on John as their fourth target, she does confirm that like they were here for John as well. Like definitely now at this point, John's not staying at Wellston. I don't think. I don't think that Sylvia will want him around. Maybe she still does. Maybe she'll still be like, no, I need this boy. This boy will be perfect for my future. But she does confirm like they were planning on taking John as well today. Anyway, she then states that she was informed. She says that she was informed of his ability. States that it's similar to conversion technology. This popped up the question for me. Does she not know that Jane is his mom? Do Ember agents not know about Jane? Because I feel like if she did know, she would definitely say something like, she would say something to the effect of like his ability is similar to his ability is like kind of like a strand of like blah 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 blah. Or I feel like she would have even said he's the son of like our test subject for the Ember experiments. So I am curious. I am curious. How deep does the Ember rabbit hole actually go? And I think this does kind of does lend credence to the fact, like what I've been saying, like in previous like videos and everything. I think Valerie, Byron, Farah, like I think the Ember agents, I think they're just kind of jobbers. Because like I said, if these people were high up, they would not be doing grunt work drug dealings. Like they wouldn't be like, you would not leave that to higher ups. You would not leave that. Like you would give that to grunts. So I think this kind of adds to like, yo, are these people really just like grunts? Are like the real enemies? Are the real like masterminds like even like farther beyond them? Like, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, that sentence honestly raised a lot of questions for me. But she then mentions, like I said, this is going back to like about John, the agents that were brought today were specifically chosen for non-complex abilities as to not fuel John up with power. So yeah, they were brought for a reason, and I guess and like I said, it even says non-complex common. Did it say common abilities? I'm like 85% sure she said common abilities. Let me check that. Let me check that real quick. Yeah, common non-complex abilities, so that he wouldn't have anything worth copying. But she then notes that it's most likely that he has the trio's abilities. Then she runs into Remy and Blake in the fake uniforms. And she tells them like, hey, we need to go here. Follow me. And they improperly refer to her with yes, ma'am, instead of the sir that we've seen them refer to Valerie and Farah. I'm curious if there's a big reason for that as to why they call like even female operative, like even female higher ups, sir as opposed to ma'am. I mean, I've seen that in other pieces of fiction where people call like even like female higher ups sir. So I am curious if there's like a specific reason to it, or if Uru was just kind of like, well, I need Farah to be able to catch on to them, so maybe I could just have like them refer to like all Ember or all higher up personnel as sir instead of ma'am. Who knows? It's really not a big deal, but they improperly refer to her, so she catches on immediately by even noticing that their uniforms are damaged, but they have not a scratch on them. So she quickly catches on, immediately activates her ability. Remy seems to be fine, but Blake begins falling asleep, which is strange. So is the echelon for, did I even use that word right? Is the limit for who gets affected by her ability higher, or like midder levels of the high tier, like 5.5 or like 5.6 where Remy is? Like, because Blake's not weak. Blake, like, I don't get me wrong, I'm sure the gap between Remy and Farah is much smaller than Blake and Farah, but it's weird that Blake seems to have a similar effect to students who we can only assume were lower than a level 4. He doesn't completely fall asleep, but he does get to be a bit tired, so I am curious about that. about how strong her ability actually affects those around her. But Remy then electrocutes him, similar to what she did to Arlo when he was falling asleep back at Rowden Hill. And he snaps back as Remy is seen taking out three of the three agents that are with Farah. And Blyke follows up with three of the finger pulse blast things where he just like launches 3 balls at them. They go out quickly and easily. And they are all just left with going up against Farah, who sees this, and she tells all units to handle John, as she has locked down the floor. Ison and Arlo hears this, and Ison tells Arlo about Farah, and Arlo then connects the dots between Farah and Fury from the footage that he saw. He mentions her ability offhandedly and wonders if they can handle her until him and Ison arrive on the scene to back them up. That's when a weird conversation does happen. Ison asks Arlo as they begin heading out if he has a plan for getting out of this situation since he's helping them out. And Arlo kind of stops and pauses and realizes that he forgot to think about himself. He forgot about himself. This moment, it's not bad, but I am a little confused why this moment is happening, honestly, because Arlo literally ended off the previous episode stating he didn't have time to play the long game. He literally said, "I'm sorry, Cass, I can't afford, I have to help them out now." So it's really, it's so strange to me, honestly. Especially because he then thinks back to what both Cass and Valerie told him. And yeah, like I said, personally, it just seems a little bit weird. I get why Arlo is concerned about himself now in the moment, but I just feel like it's so strange to hear this again when he just had a moment of, I can't afford to stall any longer. It's just kind of weird. Maybe I'm not understanding the perspective here. If you want to call me out, again, like definitely, like I'm definitely open to like hearing like why this conversation is happening right now. It's just strange, especially after this moment, after thinking about it right now. His response to it is still, "I'll figure something out." It's kind of weird in my opinion. Like I don't Arlo, what do you want, bro? What do you want, man? Anyway, Ison does take note of Arlo's demeanor in the situation, and we see Arlo rushing off, clearly a bit nervous about this situation. Arlo even notes, like, hey, Arlo even notes to himself, "You can get away with taking out a few grunts, but if Farah sees me commit treason, I don't know how I can get out of that." So, yeah. We get back to Remy and Blyke. Remy calls out Farah for being a murderer. She basically like, you have a lot of gall to call like me to like say this when you're just a murderer. And Farah gives us some insight as to like the Bureau's true emotions, like their views, their focus. She tells Remy that children don't know their world. And I'm going to be 100% honest. That's a completely true sentence. Children do not know the world. And they think they do, but a lot of times they don't. That's a true sentence. I thought I knew everything about the world when I was young, and no, I didn't. Looking back on that now, young me had a lot of dumb thoughts about how the world worked. But she then says that things aren't black and white, and she asks how far are they willing to go to help others. She even asks if they would kill for the other people they're trying to help. And honestly, that's a very fair question, especially for Remy. Because Remy did get a woman killed because she was so focused on revenge. And, that's kind of like, that was kind of like a big moment for Remy, or a moment that still hasn't been reflected on. We're not going to focus on that, though. Like, I've talked about that enough in, previous conversations and everything. But this is a bit of a strange question for Blyke to be asked. since Blake has always just kind of done what he felt is right. Blake is a person who's seen how people get treated in the world. Blake is a person who's seen the world, has had no outside influence from Vaughn, John, UnOrdinary, or anything like that. Blake just saw things like firsthand and was just kind of like, wait a minute, this is fucked. Like, this isn't right. This is not okay. So it's a very interesting question it's a very fair question for Remy. It's an interesting question for someone for a character like Blake. But anyway, she then asks them if killing for the sake of others would make them killers or saviors. I also think that's a very fair question. For me personally, when it comes to fantasy or in storytelling and everything, I do believe that if a person does kill for justice, it'd still be justice. It still would have been the right thing to do. But it depends on the character. For example, Blake. I think Blake could accept the role of taking a life and being able to recover from it. I think Blake could come back from taking a life in self-defense or because there was no other alternative or anything. I think Blake would be okay in the long run. Mentally, he would be able to say this is why it had to be done. I think Blake could recover from it. But for someone like John, I don't think that John could go down that path without major consequences to his character. I don't think John could go down the path of taking a life and make it out the other side okay, because of how much he struggles with his violence, because of how much he struggles with his anger. John is like the equivalent, I would akin John to someone like Batman. I know in a lot of iterations of Batman, he has a no-killing rule. And a lot of the times, that rule stems from the fact that Batman does not believe he could ever come back if he took a life. Batman believes he does not think he could be the same. He couldn't be a savior anymore if he took a life. I think John, for me personally, I think John should follow a similar path. You can still get justice, John, but I don't think that John should become a killer, because that would just make it harder for John to grow, for John to change. And I don't think that would have been what William would have wanted for John. Just my thoughts. Just my thoughts. Nonetheless, Farah then tells him that there is only one way for everyone to live in peace: control. Now again, this is a bit confusing to me when rereading, because there's a few times where I thought she told the two of them in time they were going to learn, this is how the world works. But then she basically follows up with that she's going to kill them. But she doesn't say that. What she specifically says is that eventually you'd learn. And I think this is to infer that you would, or you would have, had they not been targeted by the Bureau, because, yeah. So yeah, I think I just was a little unclear on what she actually meant or what was actually in the text. But again, on this, I do have to call a little bit of shenanigans, because not everyone is living in peace. Literally low tiers are being terrified and allowed to be ruled over cruelly from mid tiers, which the Bureau allows and definitely knows about, because they're targeting mid tiers to test the amplifiers. Now, I feel like it's definitely obvious we shouldn't trust what the Bureau agents are saying this, but it did feel like a very strange conversation, honestly. But the sauce is there. Farah busts out the claws. She summons them. She came with the converted abilities. I do wonder, do they always have the converted abilities, or did she just come along just kind of I might need to do this. I might need a few contingencies. I wonder. I'm curious. But we now know why she told everyone to stay away from her. We know why she wanted these two to themselves. We know why she's putting everyone to sleep. Because she's going to go ham. She wanted these two for herself. And I'm here for it. We're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But I'm hyped up. And I am curious. Can both Remy and Blake survive against her by themselves? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Fury has to be much stronger than Byron. I think that I personally think Farah is closer to Valerie's level. I think Farah is closer to Valerie's level, honestly. But who knows? Who knows? It's interesting. This is going to be an intense fight, though. And I am also curious if Ison does catch up to them. If Ison does catch up to them, I do wonder. If Ison will be the backup, or if Farah is going to catch on. I brought this up in my live reaction. I wonder if Ison can escape confrontation with the Bureau a third time. Honestly, I think more and more it's looking like someone's going to die, and I think it's between Blake and Ison. We're just going to have to keep waiting until the season finale to see what really goes on and what really happens, but only time is going to tell. Now, the episode ends with John clearly worn out. He's feeling the fatigue. He's feeling the damage. He sits down and leans against the wall, realizing that the Bureau planned for him and targeted his weaknesses, not giving him healing, not giving him higher defense. Farah even mentions earlier in the episode he's going to run out of aura eventually, but it's been confirmed John has a lot of aura, more than the average person. So I am curious what this could mean. Now, he does retort that, well, Blake's passive can keep him going. Side note, I'm fairly certain this is the first time passive has been said specifically in the series. Passive has been specifically worded. And Uru has confirmed that the passive healing and the passive recovery is Blake's passive ability. So I think this is the first time that's kind of been mentioned, specifically said, aloud. Passive stuff has been mentioned offhand. Remy has mentioned her electrical currents. They've talked about John's aura sensing and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's interesting. But fun fact is fun fact. Anyway, but he still notes that he does need a higher form of defense or healing. He then gets back up as more agents show up. And of course, none other than Zeke is among them. And John sees Zeke there as Zeke is just laughing as he usually does. And John simply smirks the tiniest smirk. The tiniest. And he simply says, Zeke, you'll have to do. And while I am excited to see Zeke get his shit rocked again, most likely, who knows? He could probably have some trick up his sleeve. Maybe he got his hand on an amplifier or something. Maybe. People are speculating that Zeke might have he might have access to the flame claws, but that is quickly dispelled when you realize no, you have to be a high tier in order to be useful for conversion. Maybe Zeke has had a level up. Honestly, if anyone should have an off-screen level up, it should be an unimportant character like Zeke. But he could still have tricks up his sleeves. But nonetheless, I'm excited to see Zeke get his shit rocked. I'm disappointed that it seems like season 2 is just ending off with the same abilities that were copied with the same ability comp as season 1. Did we really need to see this combo again? I mean, if Uru wants to do something where she shows the updated stat sheets, the stat sheet from episode 155 and the stat sheet, the current stat sheet with these abilities, now that it definitely seems like John has gotten a level up of some kind. If Uru wants to show us that, cool, but I'm still just kind of really? You couldn't have given us a bit more sauce? Please, ma'am, I just want some sauce. I want some sauce, Uru. Please, may I have some sauce? But nonetheless, the episode is still really good. I do still really enjoy it. It is pretty good overall. I still think it was a great episode. So honestly, I have to give this episode I would give this episode a level 8. Episode 340 was phenomenal, and this episode is still really good in its own right, But I just feel like for the action that was still in this episode, I feel like this episode was a little lacking in comparison to episode 340. But nonetheless, I still really like this episode. So that will be it for this video. For this review and discussion. Guys, let me know what you think about the episode down below in the comments. I'm excited for episode 342, my bad. Because we got two major fights on our side. We got John versus Zeke again and again. But we also have Remy and Blake versus Fury. It's not Farah anymore. It's Fury. Fury's on the table now, guys. But nonetheless, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. We'll see you back here tonight for that reaction. And as always, everyone, see you, Space Cowboy.